Is that what you're wearing for this?
For what?
That's a good question. Hey there, friends. Good to talk with you again. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Karen Solt. And why am I with Karen Solt? Aside from her just glowing Karen-ness, which I think is wonderful, we're going to be talking to you about substance addiction, particularly from an alcohol angle. So Karen is with me because I've had a lot of requests for me to talk about substance addiction. And I don't like to talk about things that I don't have much direct life experience with. I don't like to talk from my head. I don't even know if I have a functioning brain at this point. So I brought Karen in. Karen's willing, she's vulnerable, she's a coach, she's a curious student of life. So she's willing to talk about her experience with substance addiction as well as how she helps facilitate others freeing themselves from it. So without further ado and standing on my rambling ceremony, thank you for being here talking with us, Karen.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite. Okay, thanks for the arm wrestling.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Arm twisting.
There was a lot of arm twisting, but in a very graceful way, I think.
Some of it.
So with that said, one of the things I love about learning from your perspective of alcohol addiction, especially, is your non-traditional perspective. So I'm wondering if we can just lead right in. You've talked before, you and I, about how there's purpose to addiction and how it can actually, you've used the term, save a person's life short term. Would you mind rattling the cage on how you see that?
Yeah. I think for me, I do believe that there's purpose in everything. And I believe that people who become addicted to whatever they become addicted to, whether it's substances or any other form of addiction, it's necessary for that time being. Mm-hmm. And it might be a time when you need to disconnect and numb out and remove yourself from society, remove yourself from yourself, remove yourself from everything to kind of go into a shell and save your own life for a time being, even though that addiction will eventually start to kill you. But for a time being, it removes you enough to cocoon away for a while until you're ready to come back out. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you're able to come back out. That's the key. Some people don't get to come back out, which is the downside to it. If you can use it for a time period, and gain some perspective from it and be able to come back out, I believe that it can save your life.
Yeah. So, one of the things I heard you say, Karen, is when we go through life experiences, realistically, we're not always going to be able to process the overwhelm in the moment while it's happening. Thank you, Zephyr. So it's human nature to have to compensate and escape the emotional overwhelm of what we're going through. And would it be true that you're not advocating substance addiction is a good way to do it? No. It's simply a way that people do it. Yeah. The way that people do it. You know what I'm saying?
Did it.
The way people did it.
Did it.
For the time that they needed to do it, it's not a good long-term strategy. No. Maybe not even a good short-term strategy, but it's a compensation strategy people use short-term. And while it has horrendous effects,
long-term,
it also has purpose in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, if you can imagine going through a horrific trauma, and then how do I process that? And sometimes what people do to process that is they start to drink, or they start to use drugs, or they find a way to numb out. And numb is an extreme form of pain, right? The most extreme form of pain. So it is a numbing. It is a remove myself from society, actually disconnect not only from society, but disconnect from myself. Mm-hmm. Because I personally am in so much pain that I can't feel my own pain. It is a way of numbing out. And if that can be used as a temporary solution, great. Sometimes it's used as a solution that kills, and most times it's used as a solution that kills. I think people that the statistic of people who actually get clean and stay clean is less than 10%. Mm. So I'm absolutely not advocating drug or alcohol addiction at all. if you can get to therapy, if you can get coach help, if you can do whatever you can to resolve it consciously, do so. Absolutely. And sometimes that's just not what happens. The reality is that we are a highly addicted society. And because we are so addicted, we need to have compassion for that addiction and then find ways to get into recovery and not be stuck in the addiction. The more shame there is about the addiction, the more the addiction just kind of keeps perpetuating and bubbling under the surface of, okay, so I had trauma, then I got addicted, now I'm a piece of crap, so I got to stay more addicted because I can't come out of it because nobody accepts me. And it just keeps feeding on itself.
Yeah.
If I can have the trauma, or even not have the trauma, but get into addiction and then go, you know what, I'm better than this, I deserve more than this, find a way out of it and come out of it and realize maybe the reasons why the addiction occurred in the first place, whether that's genetically or situationally, and have compassion, then we can start to heal.
And I mean, maybe we're getting crazy here, but the message I'm hearing you say is compassion for ourselves and where we've been is a force of healing. Shaming ourselves isn't a force of healing. It's a mechanism of intimidating ourselves. So I heavily endorse compassion when it comes to healing, for sure.
And I think compassion for the homeless guy standing on the street who is highly addicted. I think one thing that I am pretty sure of in this life is that I know absolutely nothing about somebody else's pain and why he or she is in the place that they are. And addiction is not something that somebody gets into by choice. It's something that happens. You don't take a drink and go, oh, yes, I want to be addicted. This is great. What happens is there's an initial love affair with whatever substance you have that you're using, and it's the infatuation period. And addiction occurs the same way that love affair does, that eventually the infatuation stage is over, and then there's now I'm used to this thing, and then at some point, because substances will kill, I keep looking for the infatuation stage. And it doesn't come back. It does not come back with addiction. It's chasing the high, chasing that initial high that numbed me out and made me feel good does not come back. And that's when the addict has to find a way to get clean to survive, or keep chasing that high and not survive. So it's tricky, and addiction is not something that it's life and death. So it's definitely not something to play with. I do not take it lightly at all. It's something I'm pretty passionate about. So, yeah.
You know, a mutual friend of ours, John McMullen, he oftentimes says, what we do to save ourselves will eventually kill us if we stay attached to that which saved us. And, you know, there's been many people talk about, you know, when we do stupid things, quite honestly, you know, looking at it from today's perspective, we judge, when I did that was stupid. But a lot of people say, you know, giving ourselves grace is realizing in the time I was challenged or overwhelmed, I was doing the best I could with what I had in that moment. And to me, that's not an indictment of complacency and becoming passive and indifferent about our own life. It is an indictment about, better said, it's an advocacy to give ourselves grace, to give ourselves compassion, rather than shaming ourselves. You know, looking back, well, how dysfunctional have I been with my addiction? Then we just shame ourselves and then probably need more substance to numb out to how we're shaming ourselves now. So nonetheless, I really appreciate the invitation to have a compassionate view on substance as part, not all, but as part of the self-healing recovery. I think that's something that's pretty lacking based on what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are people who are obviously in recovery have a different perspective on it. And I think there are a lot of people who aren't in recovery who have never had addiction issues that just don't understand it. And why would you? So maybe looking at areas in my life other than substances where I do have addictions, where I do numb out, whether it be food, whether it be sex, whether it be animals, work, whatever it is, you know, a place where I remove myself from my feelings and I numb out a bit. Maybe still an addiction, just maybe not a life-threatening addiction.
Yeah.
You know, maybe whatever it does to get you through the moment, it just gets you through the moment. And having compassion for yourself and having compassion for people in your lives that are struggling with addiction. Because I'll tell you, the person who's addicted, believe me, they kick their own ass on a daily basis. And so having compassion for that person, maybe not understanding and it not being your experience, but a little compassion might actually start to help that person come out of the addiction and save his or her own life.
Yeah. Thank you. And in case you can't see him on the bottom of the view, we've got a roaming Zephyr on the couch, so Karen's not patting my leg, though it'd be fine if she did. She's patting Zephyr. On that Zephyr note, I'm curious, I think you've danced around a little bit of this, but I'm wondering if we pretend alcohol addiction itself is a symptom, from your experience, what are some of the more causative factors that drive the symptomatic behavior of using alcohol?
I think there's a genetic component, mostly, that when I'm a child and when I was a young girl and I started to drink, I handled alcohol differently than other people. It was just obvious. I mean, at a pretty young age, I was pretty out of control. So it hit me differently. I think there's definitely a genetic component with alcohol. I think our brains are wired differently. I do think that addiction can happen after enough abuse, continual abuse. It can become an addiction, needing to keep abusing ourselves. Yeah, I don't know, other than situationally needing to numb out from trauma or things I've seen. You know, I did my internship with a veteran community, and I'm a veteran myself. It was extremely rewarding, and addiction with PTSD is huge. You know, I have these images and traumas that I'm trying to process. I don't know how to process them. I don't really know where to go. I'm having nightmares. It's a way of numbing out. It can be useful up to a point, you know, and then the tables have to turn. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I love the answer to the question that I probably forgot at this point.
Good.
I've heard John Bradshaw, now the late John Bradshaw, he's a wonderful author, a lot of programs on addiction, amongst other things. John Bradshaw had a big history of alcohol addiction himself, and I've heard him generalize, maybe overly generalized, maybe appropriately, it doesn't matter, but I've heard him generalize all addiction is truly an addiction to not feeling how we're feeling.
Yeah.
Is that halfway what you were saying?
Yeah, it's numbing out. It's escapism, right? I have these feelings. I hate these feelings. These feelings are eating me up, or these images, or this whatever. And to not feel these feelings is more important than to feel these feelings. So numbing out is important in that moment. A problem of it is that when I numb out the negative feelings, the shame, the fear, the sadness, the anger, whatever those negative feelings are, I also numb out the joy, the happiness, the liberation, the freedom, the peace, the feelings that feel good. I numb everything. And it's just what I have to do to cope for a time being.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think so enlightening to realize when we numb the hurtful stuff, you take anesthesia, you don't feel your pain anymore, you also don't feel the pleasure of a shoulder massage. So you numb the hurtful stuff, also means you numb the pleasurable stuff, and thus part of the cycle continues where now in order to feel anything, because my emotions are numb, now the reaction is, well, let me go feel the inebriation of alcohol. I'll feel the chemical reaction in my body and the euphoria of it, because I'm not feeling these God-given miracles inside of me.
Yeah, it's a release. It's an instantaneous feeling of calming, and then a feeling of anxiety in between.
Yeah.
In between the using, and it's a vicious cycle. It really is. And so getting clean, personally, I'm of the opinion that if you're addicted, nothing else can happen until you work on the addiction first, until you clean up. You can't, you can put Band-Aids on it, and you can go to a therapist, and you can go to a coach, and you can get some emotional work done, and you can go to spiritual retreats and stuff like that. If you're doing any of that while you're still using, I'm of the opinion that you're putting a Band-Aid on something, and it's just going to keep perpetuating. So my belief is the addiction and dealing with the addiction comes first.
And so there's people right now watching this who I'm guessing they're slid down the slippery slope of substance use, they're in the swamp. So in a general way, what is the first action item for a person to start dealing head on with the addiction?
Yeah, I think the first thing is acknowledgement that this is an addiction. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing is to go, okay, maybe I have a problem here. Maybe this isn't working for me. And you know, my experience was essentially having to say to my best friend, which was alcohol at the time, you can no longer be my friend. Wow. And it was hard. It was really hard. And figuring out how to live my life without my best friend, who wasn't my best friend, but in the moment felt like my best friend. Wow. Right? So acknowledging that, which is very hard and very painful, is key. From there, I would say if you're extremely addicted, can't live without booze on a daily basis, have DTs, drugs or alcohol, you know, have severe reactions when you're not using, you know, my recommendation would be to get some medical help detoxing. Yeah. Because detoxing can be life-threatening. Yeah. Because this is something that you now use to breathe. Cool. So if breathing means that I have to have substances to breathe, when I don't have those substances, the panic attacks, the DTs, the detoxing can kill a person. So if you're that addicted, which many people are, I would always recommend getting some medical intervention and starting there. So
acknowledgement, medical intervention, if needed. And once that's taken care of, you know, the acknowledgement, medical intervention if needed, then, you know, I'm curious, how important is it to be a part of a group of some sort of or another versus saying, I'm going to do this on my own?
Yeah, life and death, for me.
Sounds important.
Fairly. The spiritual connection, the deal with substance abuse, my opinion, is that the spiritual connection that I gained was with me and alcohol. That was my spiritual connection. My spiritual connection now is with people who are in recovery. It's part of my spiritual connection. Some of my spiritual connection is with people who aren't in recovery and have spiritual connection. So finding a connection, because alcohol is a way to find a connection to a substance. Drugs are a way to find a connection to drugs. So we're disconnected from ourselves and from others. We have to connect to other people in a spiritual group where the group is more powerful than the person. Yeah. The group together is that spiritual connection. Carl Jung talked about that. You know, it's imperative, my opinion. Or what ends up happening is the addict and alcoholic isolates and is miserable and doesn't use. Yeah. And that's not the goal of life. The goal of life is to be blissful and peaceful and happy and free and not alone and isolating and white-knuckling it and not enjoying life. My opinion, maybe I would hope that that's what people would want.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, humbling our ego and realizing I need to be a part of something other than just myself. You know, it's, in my opinion, it's kind of like insignificance out of humbleness, not shame. I need something more than what I think I am.
And I need to be able to help others, you know, because we, addicts and alcoholics, need to know that there are other people who have done it. Because when we first get clean, it seems impossible, you know, and getting through moments seem impossible. So knowing that other people have done it for months, years, decades is real crucial for us in recovery. It gives hope.
Awesome. Well, Karen, thank you for living every drip of the life experiences you've lived, every drip of suffering, every drip of struggle, every drip of recovery, every drip of self-enhancement and healing, so that you could emanate some of your life wisdom here. Appreciate you. And before we close, any other last thoughts come to my mind, or your mind if you're telepathic, that you want to share?
No. If you're, I guess, yes, that was a lie. If you're watching this and you're struggling with addiction, contact someone, whoever, and get some help, because you deserve to live. Yeah.
Thank you. And Karen, I know you're active blogging about all things human, heart, mind, and soul. Where can people find you online?
People can find me at KarenSolt.com and on Facebook, Karen M. Solt. And I put all my blogs up on Facebook. Talk primarily about connection, human connection. I try to do my blogs in a way that makes sense of things that a lot of times seem senseless.
I like that. Well, thank you again, Karen. And of course, Zephyr's been the third part of this trinity of
Spiritual
JP and
connection.
Karen, for sure. And thank you for watching this video. My guess is that what we've talked about in this video is absolutely useless. Please make it useful by doing something with it. I think that's where the benefit of this wisdom comes in. It's what you do with it. It's not just listening. So I'll be wishing you lovely people well, and talking to you next time.